Stop what you're doing and answer this honestly. In the last week, how many times have you caught yourself saying, "Well, at my age," or "I'm too old for that," or "Those opportunities are for younger people"? If it's even once, you're committing one of the 3 fatal mistakes that Napoleon Hill spent 20 years warning people about. Mistakes that guarantee you'll spend your final decades in quiet desperation instead of powerful fulfillment. I know 2 men who both turned 55 the same year. Same education, same industry, similar savings. One of them is now 70, running a consulting business, mentoring CEOs, traveling 4 months a year, and just started learning Italian. The other is 70, sitting in the same chair he sat in at 55, watching TV, complaining about young people, waiting for his life to end. The difference between these 2 men isn't genetics, luck, or money. It's 3 decisions. 3 things one of them stopped doing that the other never stopped. And Napoleon Hill, after studying over 500 of the most successful people in history, discovered that these 3 behaviors are the difference between people who grow stronger with age and people who simply grow old. Here's what makes this even more important. Hill didn't discover these principles by studying young people at the peak of their careers. He discovered them by studying what separated the people who stayed powerful and purposeful into their 70s and 80s from those who faded into irrelevance by 50. Andrew Carnegie was 83 and still building businesses. Thomas Edison was inventing in his 80s. Henry Ford revolutionized his company in his 70s. John D. Rockefeller's most strategic years came after 60. What did they know that most people don't? What were they not doing that everyone else was doing? Today, you're going to find out. And if you're over 50 or approaching 50, what you learn in the next 20 minutes could completely change the trajectory of your remaining years. Because here's the truth. Nobody wants to say out loud. Most people don't die at 75 or 80. They die at 50 and get buried 30 years later. They make these 3 mistakes, and from that point on, they're just marking time, waiting for the end. But it doesn't have to be that way. Not for you, not anymore. Before we dive in, I need you to do something that might feel uncomfortable, but is absolutely necessary. Comment right now, "I refuse to fade." Write it. Declare it publicly. Because what you're about to learn will challenge everything society has told you about aging, retirement, and what's possible after 50. And you need to commit right now that you're going to be different. You're going to be one of the rare ones who gets stronger, sharper, more valuable with every passing year. Now hit that like button and subscribe, because the 3 things Hill warns against are so common, so socially acceptable, that most people don't even realize they're committing suicide in slow motion. Let's begin. The first thing Napoleon Hill says you must never do after 50 is this: never stop learning new skills. And I don't mean casually reading a book or watching a documentary. I mean deliberately, systematically acquiring new capabilities that make you more valuable, more relevant, more powerful. Here's why this is so critical. The moment you stop learning, you start dying. Not physically at first, but mentally. And mental death always precedes physical death. Your brain is not a hard drive with limited storage. Your brain is a muscle. And like every muscle, it either grows or atrophies. There's no middle ground. When you were 25, learning was survival. You had to learn to get the job, keep the job, advance in the job. But somewhere around 45 or 50, something deadly happens. You think you've learned enough. You've got your expertise. You've got your routine. You've figured out your little corner of the world. And unconsciously, you close the door to new information. You start saying things like, "I'm too old to learn technology," or "Let the young people handle that," or "I've been doing it this way for 30 years. And every time you say that, you're not just avoiding learning. You're declaring to yourself and to the world that your value is in the past, not the future. You're announcing that you have nothing new to contribute. You're volunteering for irrelevance. Napoleon Hill watched this pattern destroy countless people. He saw men who were powerful, respected, influential at 50, completely forgotten by 60. Not because they retired, but because they stopped growing. They stopped adapting. They stopped acquiring new tools. And in a world that never stops changing, standing still is the same as moving backward. Hill interviewed Henry Ford when Ford was in his 70s, and Ford told him something profound. He said, "Anyone who stops learning is old, whether at 20 or 80. Anyone who keeps learning stays young. The greatest thing in life is to keep your mind young." Ford wasn't just talking about staying mentally sharp. He was talking about staying valuable, staying relevant, staying powerful. Think about the world you're living in right now. The skills that made you successful 20 years ago are probably obsolete. The methods that worked in 1990 or 2000 don't work now. The tools have changed. The platforms have changed. The entire game has changed. So you have two choices. You can complain about how the world has changed and retreat into nostalgia, or you can adapt, learn the new game, and dominate it with the wisdom you've accumulated. The people who choose the first option become bitter and irrelevant. The people who choose the second option become even more powerful than they were at 30 because they combine new skills with decades of experience. That combination is unstoppable. But here's what stops most people. They're afraid of looking stupid. They're afraid of being the oldest person in the room who doesn't understand something. They're afraid of admitting they don't know. So they hide. They avoid situations where their lack of knowledge might be exposed. They surround themselves only with people and topics they already understand. And that is the beginning of the end. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, wrote, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." He understood that learning isn't just about accumulating information. It's about staying engaged with life, staying curious, staying humble enough to admit you don't know everything. The moment you think you know everything, you're finished. Hill said it more bluntly. He said, "The person who stops learning has stopped living in any meaningful sense. They're just waiting to die." So here's what you do starting today. Choose one new skill to learn in the next 90 days. Not a casual hobby, a real skill that increases your value, your capability, your relevance. Maybe it's learning how to create content online. Maybe it's understanding AI and how it's changing your industry. Maybe it's learning a new language. Maybe it's mastering a software tool that everyone else knows, but you've been avoiding. Whatever it is, commit to it. 15 minutes a day, every day, for 90 days. That's all it takes to acquire basic competence in almost anything. But here's the key. You can't just consume information. You have to apply it. You have to produce something with what you learn. Create something. Build something. Solve something. Because that's how learning becomes power. When you can do something today that you couldn't do 90 days ago, you've grown. And growth at 50, 60, 70 is even more powerful than growth at 25, because you have the wisdom to apply it strategically. The young have energy and new skills, but no wisdom. The old have wisdom, but often no new skills. Combine both, and you become formidable. That's what Carnegie, Ford, Edison, and Rockefeller understood. They never stopped learning. They never stopped adapting. They never became too old for new ideas. And that's why they stayed powerful until the very end. So commit right now. What's the one skill you're going to learn in the next 90 days? Comment it below. Make it public. Make yourself accountable. Because this isn't optional. This is survival. This is the difference between fading away and staying in the game. Now, the second thing. Napoleon Hill says, you must never do after 50. Never stop building new relationships. This one is even more dangerous than the first because it happens so gradually you don't notice until it's too late. Here's what typically happens. You hit 50 and you have your established circle. Your old friends from college, your colleagues from work, your neighbors, your family. These relationships are comfortable. You have history. You have shared memories. You know each other's stories. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you stop meeting new people. You stop seeking out new connections. Your social world becomes closed. And here's why that's deadly. Your network is your net worth, but it's more than that. Your network is your relevance. Your network is your access to new ideas, new opportunities, new possibilities. When your network stops growing, your world shrinks. You start hearing the same opinions over and over. You start having the same conversations over and over. You start seeing the world through the same lens you've been using for 20 years. And without new perspectives, new energy, new connections, you become stagnant. Napoleon Hill discovered something fascinating in his research. Every single person he studied who remained powerful and successful after 60 had one thing in common. They continuously built relationships with younger people. Not to feel young, not to be trendy, but because they understood that younger people have their finger on the pulse of what's coming next. They see opportunities that older people miss. They have energy and optimism that older people have often lost. And when you build genuine relationships with people from different generations, different industries, different backgrounds, something magical happens. You stay connected to the future instead of trapped in the past. Andrew Carnegie was famous for this. Even in his 70s and 80s, he was constantly meeting new people, especially young entrepreneurs and innovators. He didn't do this out of charity. He did it because he knew that staying isolated from new ideas was professional and mental death. But here's what stops most people over 50 from building new relationships: pride. They think, I've already made it. I don't need to network anymore. I'm not looking for a job. I'm not trying to climb any ladders. And that's exactly the wrong attitude. You're not building new relationships to get something from people. You're building them to stay alive mentally, to stay engaged with the world, to contribute your wisdom to people who need it while absorbing their energy and fresh perspectives. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "We are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. To act against one another is contrary to nature. We need each other, not just when we're young and building careers, but throughout our entire lives. Isolation kills, not just emotionally, but mentally and even physically. Study after study shows that people with strong social connections live longer, stay sharper, and experience less depression. But society tells you the opposite. Society says, "You're 55, you've paid your dues, go ahead and withdraw, spend time with your grandkids, stop hustling, stop networking, just coast." And that advice, no matter how well-meaning, is poison. Because coasting means declining. There's no plateau in life. You're either growing or dying. So here's what you do. In the next 30 days, intentionally meet 3 new people. Not casual acquaintances, real connections. People who are doing interesting things, who have different perspectives, who challenge your assumptions. Join a new group. Attend a workshop or conference in a field you're curious about. Reach out to someone you admire on LinkedIn and offer to buy them coffee. Volunteer for a cause where you'll meet purpose-driven people. The specific method doesn't matter. What matters is that you break the pattern of isolation. And here's the critical part. When you meet these new people, don't position yourself as the expert who has all the answers. Position yourself as the curious student who wants to learn from them. Ask questions. Listen more than you talk. Be genuinely interested in their perspective, their challenges, their dreams. When you do this, something beautiful happens. They feel valued, and they open up. And you gain access to a world you wouldn't have seen otherwise. This isn't manipulation. This is wisdom. The Stoics taught that the wise person is always learning from everyone around them. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." That principle becomes even more important after 50. Because if you're only talking, you're only accessing what you already know. But if you're listening, you're accessing what others know. And that keeps you sharp, relevant, and connected. Napoleon Hill observed that people who stayed powerful after 60 had this in common. They were mentors and students simultaneously. They shared their wisdom with younger people, but they also learned from them. They didn't see age as a reason to stop growing connections. They saw it as a reason to grow them even more intentionally. So commit right now. Who are the 3 new people you're going to connect with in the next 30 days? Comment 1 name or 1 type of person below. Make it real. Make it specific. Because this decision, this commitment, could completely change your next 20 years. New relationships bring new opportunities, new energy, new perspectives, and new reasons to stay engaged with life. Don't let pride or comfort rob you of that. And now, the 3rd thing Napoleon Hill says you must never do after 50. This is the most important one. This is the one that determines whether you spend your final decades in quiet desperation or powerful fulfillment. Never stop having a definite major purpose. Hill called this the starting point of all achievement. A clear, specific, burning desire for something beyond yourself. Something that gives you a reason to wake up excited every single day. Something that makes you feel like you're contributing, creating, building, not just consuming and waiting. And here's what happens to most people over 50. They lose their purpose, not suddenly, but gradually. They retire, or their kids grow up, or they achieve the goals they set 30 years ago, and then nothing. No new mountain to climb, no new mission to fulfill, just comfort, routine, and slow decline. And without purpose, life becomes empty. You might have money, health, and time, but if you don't have a reason, those things feel hollow. Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, "Those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how. He observed that the prisoners who survived weren't always the strongest or healthiest. They were the ones who had a reason to survive, a purpose beyond the suffering. Hill understood this deeply. He said, "The person without a major purpose is like a ship without a rudder, drifting aimlessly at the mercy of every wave. And after 50, that drifting becomes deadly, because you don't have the excuse of, 'I'm still figuring it out' anymore. You have all the experience, wisdom, and resources you need. The only question is, what are you going to do with them?" Here's what most people get wrong about purpose after 50. They think purpose has to be massive, world-changing, epic. But Hill taught something different. Your purpose doesn't have to change the world. It has to change you. It has to give you a reason to grow, contribute, and stay engaged. Maybe your purpose is writing a book that shares the lessons you've learned. Maybe it's starting a small business that solves a problem you've personally experienced. Maybe it's mentoring young people in your field. Maybe it's mastering a craft you've always wanted to learn. Maybe it's building something with your hands that will outlast you. The specific purpose doesn't matter nearly as much as having one, because purpose does something powerful. It organizes your entire life around a central mission. Every decision becomes easier because you can ask, "Does this serve my purpose or not?" Every day has direction instead of drift. Every effort has meaning instead of just filling time. Andrew Carnegie's major purpose after he sold his steel company wasn't to relax on a beach. It was to give away his entire fortune strategically to build libraries, universities, and institutions that would serve humanity long after he was gone. He worked on that purpose until he died. And he died fulfilled, not because he was rich, but because he completed his mission. Thomas Edison's purpose wasn't just to invent. It was to solve problems that improved people's lives. He worked on that until his last breath at 84. Henry Ford's purpose was to make transportation accessible to everyone. He refined that mission into his 70s. These men didn't retire from purpose. They retired from specific jobs, but their purpose kept them alive, engaged, and powerful until the end. And here's what Hill discovered. People with a definite major purpose live longer, stay healthier, and experience more joy than people without one. Not because purpose magically fixes your body, but because it gives you a reason to take care of your body. It gives you a reason to get out of bed, to eat well, to exercise, to stay sharp. Because you need your body and mind to be strong enough to fulfill your mission. But here's the tragedy. Most people over 50 have given up on having a mission. They've accepted the societal narrative that says, "You've worked hard. Now it's time to rest, relax, and enjoy your golden years." And that narrative, as kind as it sounds, is a death sentence. Because human beings aren't designed to rest indefinitely. We're designed to strive, to overcome, to create, to contribute. When you remove that from someone's life, they deteriorate rapidly. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do?'" He understood that purpose isn't optional. It's what makes us human. It's what gives life meaning. So here's what you need to do right now. If you don't currently have a definite major purpose, you need to create one. Not someday. Today. Sit down with a piece of paper and ask yourself these questions. What problem do I want to solve? What do I want to create before I die? Who do I want to help? What legacy do I want to leave? What would make me excited to wake up every morning for the next 20 years? Write down your answers. Don't filter them. Don't judge them. Just write. Then, from everything you wrote, choose one thing. The one thing that resonates most deeply. The one thing that, when you think about it, makes you feel alive. That's your definite major purpose. Now write it as a clear, specific statement. Not vague, not wishy-washy, specific. For example, my purpose is to write a book sharing the leadership lessons I learned in 30 years of business, so that young entrepreneurs don't have to make the same mistakes I made. Or, my purpose is to build a consulting practice that helps small businesses survive and thrive, because I know what it's like to struggle. Or, my purpose is to mentor 10 young people every year, helping them discover their potential and avoid the traps I fell into. Whatever your purpose is, write it clearly. Then read it every single morning when you wake up and every night before you sleep. Hill called this auto-suggestion. You're programming your subconscious mind with your purpose so that every decision, every action, every thought aligns with it. And something remarkable happens when you do this consistently. Opportunities appear. People show up. Resources materialize. Not because of magic, but because your mind is now alert to anything that serves your purpose. You start noticing things you would have missed before. You start taking actions you would have avoided before. You start becoming the person capable of fulfilling that purpose. This isn't theory. This is how Hill himself lived. Even after he achieved massive success with Think and Grow Rich, he didn't retire. He kept teaching, writing, speaking until his final days, because his purpose was to help people understand the power of their own minds. That purpose kept him vital and valuable until 87 years old. So let me ask you directly, what's your definite major purpose for the next 20 years? If you don't have an answer, that's your emergency. That's your crisis. Not your health, not your finances, not your circumstances. Your lack of purpose. Because without it, everything else is just maintenance. You're just maintaining a body and a life until they run out. But with purpose, everything changes. Suddenly, you're not old. You're experienced. You're not retired. You're refocused. You're not declining. You're evolving into the most powerful version of yourself yet. Comment below, I am building my purpose. Write it. Declare it. Commit to it. Because this is the difference between people who live fully until their last breath and people who just exist for decades waiting for the end. Let me bring this all together. Napoleon Hill spent 20 years studying the most successful people in history. And here's what he discovered about life after 50. The people who stayed powerful, relevant, joyful, and fulfilled all avoided 3 fatal mistakes. They never stopped learning new skills. They never stopped building new relationships. And they never stopped having a definite major purpose. Everything else, the health, the wealth, the happiness, all flowed from those 3 commitments. Because when you're constantly learning, you stay sharp and valuable. When you're constantly building relationships, you stay connected and relevant. And when you're driven by purpose, you stay alive in the truest sense. Your body might age, but your spirit grows stronger. But here's what makes this urgent. You don't have unlimited time to make this decision. Every day you wait is a day lost. Every week you spend in comfortable decline is a week you'll never get back. Hill used to say, don't wait. The time will never be just right. Start where you are, with what you have, right now. Choose one skill to learn. Reach out to one new person. Define one clear purpose. Just start, because starting breaks the pattern. Starting creates momentum, and momentum changes everything. The Stoics taught that the obstacle is the way. Your age isn't an obstacle. Your circumstances aren't obstacles. The only obstacle is your decision to see them as obstacles. Change that decision, and everything changes. You become one of the rare ones, the ones who get better with age, the ones who become more valuable, more respected, more fulfilled in their 60s, 70s, and 80s than they ever were in their 30s and 40s. And here's the beautiful truth. You have advantages now that you didn't have at 25. You have wisdom, you have experience, you have resources, you have credibility, you have perspective. The only question is, are you going to use those advantages, or are you going to waste them? Are you going to be like the majority who fade into irrelevance? Or are you going to be like Carnegie, Ford, Edison, Rockefeller, and Hill himself, who stayed in the game until the very end? The choice is yours. But you have to choose today, not tomorrow, not next week. Today, because tomorrow is promised to no one, and next week you might have talked yourself out of it. Right now, in this moment, you have clarity, you have inspiration, you have the knowledge. Use it. Comment "I refuse to fade," like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone over 50 who needs to hear it. Because the world needs more people who understand that age is not decline. Age is evolution, and you're about to prove it. Your most powerful years are still ahead of you. Let's go.